there any other medical issues over religion? Nothing short, no. All right. Good. Very cool. Thank God.
There we go.
Yeah. I'm just so full. You know, Kipper might be with me. So I nice to get a lot of kids that, kids can get those accidents. Which haven't been happening. You took the thing that this is where you get issues and young people. But diabetics and hypertensives and people taking microdose, but they don't
You would have liked the shir last night. I gave a shir on what's called pachos mikashir, I'll post it. I'll post it on YouTube. Yeah, yeah. Okay. So we're again, as I mentioned yesterday, we're switching gears to mekach umemkar, to laws of purchases and trade. Yesterday, we dealt with the question, is it ever permissible to take the law into your own hands? And apparently, according to some opinions, even though you can't seize someone's assets to pay back a debt, if, however, there's another kind of transaction, which is like a sale, there are poskim who do allow you to seize assets if it's payment due upon delivery. You deliver the goods, the guy doesn't have the money. Some poskim say that you would be allowed to seize his asset in order to get paid for it. I don't think you would be allowed to. So first of all, we pointed out that in secular law this would not fly. But apparently the argument is once you're already in on his property to deliver the goods, you have a right to be there, and therefore you can take something that belongs to him. Okay, so again, secular law it would differ in this respect. So you certainly don't want to be in violation of Dina de Malchusa. Okay, next she'ela. Misha kana tavnit beitzim, ucheshapatach kama mehabeitzim matza b'neihem beitzim im dam she'inam ru'uyim la'achila. Person purchases a box of eggs, and when he opens it, he discovers after cracking open a couple of eggs, that he finds that some of them have blood spots in them and they're not edible. Is he allowed to basically bring back the whole box and say, I want a refund? Or do we say no, that it's still a binding sale, and at least you have to pay for the eggs that are okay. Let's say 3 out of the 12 are no good, but you still have to pay for the 9. Or do we say that you can just nullify the entire sale? So the answer is Mi shekana tavnit beitzim av shematza sharov habeitzim im dam haritzarach liot shamekach batel v'hamocher haritzarach lahachzer lakones kasbu kishashilein. He says, really, if you find a box of eggs, even if you find, the majority of the eggs are no good, we should normally declare that the sale is completely null and void, and the seller would have to return the money. Ulam haminag bisman hazeh she'ein ha'mevat lemes ha'mekach ve'hefsed kulo shel hakona. However, that's not the prevailing custom today. I don't know. I guess he's speaking in Israel. He's certainly not. We're not. That's if I opened up a box of eggs and I found that a bunch of them were not usable, I'm pretty sure the supermarket would take back the box of eggs. So maybe he's talking about what's going on in Israel today. I don't know, but let's see. He says apparently the onus is on the purchaser according to the custom that he's referring to. So what is his source for this? He says Ayin b'tshuvas harash klal kuf beis b'simin ches. The Rush discusses this very tshuva. Shekasav hamocher beitzim lachavero umatza mehem muzarot she'inam ru'uyim la'achila. If a guy purchases eggs and he finds some of the eggs have been fertilized and are already in gestation, so they're not edible. So even if the seller was completely unaware, the buyer has a right to return those eggs. And the Rush's argument is that even if the seller was himself just a middleman, and he could argue, well, I bought these from the farmer. What do you want from me? It's not my fault that the eggs are no good. I'm just the middleman. Why should I take a loss? Too bad. You don't have a right to cause someone else loss just because you bought faulty merchandise. Okay, so that's the Rush's argument. The Rush says it's a mekach batel. It's a sale that is nullified because it was under false pretenses. Now, Umaran Shulchan Aruch b'Choshen Mishpat b'Siman Reish Lamed Beis Sif Yutes Hevi la'alacha tshuva zu v'siyim sham v'achshav lo nagu kach u'minog mevatel halacha ad kan l'shana. Surprisingly, even though the Shulchan Aruch cites this responsum from the Rush, he nevertheless ends up saying, but that's not the prevailing minhag. The Shulchan Aruch is writing this in the 16th century, several centuries after at least 3-4 centuries after the Rush. And then he says, in Betshuvas, Leminchas Yitzchak, Machmir b'matzadam, af sharufo safna da'ara, v'mnimtzadam ein rubokain. Let's see. We'll have to take a look at the Minchas Yitzchak. There's really, he sort of leaves us hanging. It would seem to me that even in Israel today, if you're going to go to the supermarket, and you're going to buy eggs and you find that a bunch of them are bad, then you do have a right to go back to the market. So it could be that the Shulchan Aruch was just writing that in his time because of whatever economic conditions existed back then. Chelik Dalet Siman Nun Vav. Let's take a look at the Minchas Yitzchak.
When was that written?
The Minchas Yitzchak is 20th century. So it should provide us with what's considered to be conventional today. Hold on.
You need to prove that the eggs had blood on it, or how do you go back?
Yeah, so we'll have to find out. So let's take a look at the Minchas Yitzchak. Here we go. Peleg Dalid. And what did we say was the tshuva number? Siman Nun Vav. All right, here we go. Okay, this tshuva is not about Choshen Mishpat. This tshuva is about the question of whether an egg that is unfertilized, an unfertilized egg that has a blood spot, is it kosher or not? So that's not going to help us in our quest to be able to determine this halacha. I have to do my homework, and I will, b'li neder, try and find an answer for you. It doesn't make sense to me why this minhag should be the prevailing minhag today. It might have been the prevailing minhag in the times of the Shulchan Aruch. Okay, so we'll have to come back to this. Okay, let us go on. The next sheila. Okay, Misha mocher eze mitzrachim o eze schora o mechonit o maskir bayit v'chayotze bazeh. Someone sells merchandise, or is selling a car, or is leasing a house, and so forth. V'yesh bedavar hahu eze mum b'mekcha. And there's a defect in the item that he is selling or leasing. Ve'ena omer l'koina al osomum, he does not say a word to the buyer about that defect. Elamocher lo kifi erech hamum ve'eno mat'ehu b'shavyo, and instead sells him the merchandise with a significant discount, but doesn't reveal that the reason for the discount is because of the defect. So, you know how they say, if it's too good to be true, if it sounds too good to be true, it usually is. Okay? So, no, if it sounds too good to be true, it usually is. It usually is too good to be true. Yeah, okay. So that's the saying. So ha'imutr lasos keno aser. So is it permissible to do that or not? In other words, you make no representation. You just say for sale. This is for sale. I'm selling it for such and such an amount. V'yesh kan mishum gonev das habrios bazeh. Have I in any way deceived the buyer by not revealing the defect? But at the same time, I'm not overcharging him. I'm giving him a discount in consideration of the defect. So what does secular law have to say about that?
The primary principle is buyer beware, caveat emptor. So buyer has to do his own due diligence, all that, except that the seller is not allowed to sell something with a latent defect, hide something, right? You can't cover up a defect, or you know that there's a defect and you're going to sell it to them. The patent defects, the obvious ones with just regular sort of, you could look at it or whatever, that's on the buyer. But this might be a latent defect. But then the question is what's the loss? So he should have told you about that. What did you lose by way of damages if he already credited you with the price, right? You haven't lost anything. But I would argue that you may not have bought it in the first place had you known of the defect. Maybe you don't want it, so I think it's a misrepresentation. So I think that it's probably a remedy. Maybe you can cancel the sale, but I'm not sure.
A good example will be if you wash it and it's gonna, just the color,
Like if you buy a garment.
Yeah, and you wash it and it's gone, it's all, the color's gone. So you cannot use it anymore. So basically.
Or you could re-dye it.
Yeah, well, but that's an extra job, and you know how it's going to be turning out. So
Okay, so the answer is Mishamalim la'oto mum me'hakona. Afilu kishamocher lo kefi hashivoy shel hadavar hahu. He says, if you conceal that there is a defect, in other words, you don't reveal it to the buyer, even though you're giving him a discount in consideration of the defect, umavchis mehamachir mishum amum shabo, yesh kan mishum iser genevas das. It is going to be aser and halacha. Anytime an item presents itself as whole, right, similar to what Marv was saying, the item looks completely normal. It has a defect that there at face value the buyer has no way of assuming that there may be a defect. When you purchase an item, there's an assumption that what you see is what you get. If there's a latent defect that you'd failed to disclose to the buyer, that's considered to be genevas das. You're deceiving him, even though you're giving him a discount. V'lachein kishabal limkor lakoina iza davar, tzarich lahodio al hamum sheyesh badavar. And therefore, the onus is upon the seller. In other words, the buyer does not have the obligation to say, hey, is there anything wrong with this? Why are you charging so little for it? What if he doesn't ask that question? It is the onus is upon the seller to reveal that appearances can be deceiving and there's something wrong with this item. There's something defective with this item, and that's why I'm charging such a small amount. So I think that here secular law might be in accord with that. What assumptions do we think that the buyer is making when he purchases the item? And Mordechai's example was a good example, but there are other such examples as well. Where
that would be where this is a little tricky. So let's assume, let's say somebody purchasing a house. Let's say that it's an older house, and the plumbing, the pipes are rusted or something like that. Now that's not visible, so it's assumed in today's market that you should be hiring those home inspection guys to do all this sort of things.
Right.
So you're not saying that these are rusted pipes. You're assuming he's going to bring a home inspector guy. If he catches it, he catches it.
Right.
So that's how it works. Seems to be right. So
Yeah.
would he be reliable?
No, but he wouldn't know it's rust. How would he know it's behind the wall?
Because he should be hiring a guy, a home inspector.
Well, I could check it.
I think that when, first of all, is he legally required to get a home inspector?
Not anymore.
But
Used
that's
to
the
be.
buyer beware thing. Buyer should get a home inspector.
Right.
In any event, but the vendor, like Hal was saying, vendor may not know rusty pipes. If he doesn't know, then he has no obligation to go and check. Like it is what it is, right?
But should take it away from rusty pipes, because that's unseen. What about if he's selling a car that you know has a mechanical fault? Right?
Right.
It's a wear and tear.
But
You know,
the point,
first at a time.
right, the point that Ron is raising is that sometimes it'll depend on the industry also. Yeah, when it comes to merchandise, chattel, like clothing, a car, there are times when you go to a used car lot and they explicitly say, as is, no warranty. So when they say, as is, no warranty, you know that there may be something wrong that the seller does not want to take responsibility for. And therefore, it would be your responsibility to either take it sight unseen or to take it to a mechanic, right, before you purchase it. And the same thing that Ron is arguing is when a person purchases a house, in certain respects, the law does place the onus on the buyer. Like you can't assume that the seller is going to know about every single fault. What if there's a cracked foundation and he has no way of knowing about it, right? Because he never experienced it before. And it's not unusual for there to be cracks in the foundation, but the buyer would want to know that. So he's got to do his own due diligence. Here we're talking about where there's a clear defect in what you're selling or leasing, and you don't reveal it even though you know it. So if it's something that the seller, we would assume, should know about, because this is something that would affect the usability of the item that's being purchased, so then the onus is on the seller to reveal it. If the seller can claim, I didn't know, then the onus would go back on the buyer, presumably. Okay. So he says, "V'nira davka kishakona lo yada laolam mehamum hahu sheyesh bedavar azay yesh kan genevas das." He says it's only if the buyer had no idea that there was such a defect that he can claim that I was deceived. Aval kol shahakona barur lanu sheyeda achar kach me'osamum shebadavar ein kan genevas das. But if the buyer should realize immediately upon using it for the first time that there's something defective here, then there's no genevas das. Ela hachlata tia nusuna biyado im lahachzir hamekach o shavalo hamachir shekanav or osomekach velo yevatlo. So instead, it's really the buyer's decision, he says, to either return the item or to keep it with its defect because he paid so little for it.
So you call that an election. So if he elects to keep the car knowing of the defect, he's waived the right to claim.
That's right.
against the defect.
That's right. You at some point, if immediately upon driving it off the lot, you hear the clang, 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 right? So then you can't claim later that, hey, this is a defective car. Obviously it's a defective car. You knew that as soon as you used it for the first time. So you have no right. But he says, as soon as you hear the clang, 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 if you bring it back and says, no, I don't want this, so then you have a right. It's only if you accept it and then you and then after, like a week later, you decide you don't want it. My son bought it, one of my sons, I'm not going to reveal who, he bought a car from a merchant, shall we say, also from this community. And the car has one defect, which is it has a terrible smell when you get inside. And my son decided to live with it. I said, how are you going to take out a girl in this car? It smells like sweaty socks, like constantly. Yeah. So apparently cars can get that way. I was trying to find out online how he can get rid of the smell. Apparently there's something deep into the guts of the car that
The smoker, people who smoke in the car, is going to smell always. You cannot get rid of it.
yeah.
It gets into the fabric, into the seats, everywhere. So it's that's it.
Okay. All right. We'll hold it here for today. Have a great day. So we'll learn the Mirz Hashem tomorrow.